Hello, I'm going to talk about billionaires for a little time because it's quite interesting. In 2025, we saw a record number with a collective wealth of nearly 14 trillion pounds, i.e. enough to eradicate poverty many times over. Trump has earned 2 billion for himself whilst he's been in power, and his family are now worth 4 billion. And shares in one of Elon Musk's companies have gone up. So old Elon is worth 1 trillion. He's the first trillionaire. And I'm sure there's going to be many, many trillionaires that will emerge in the world, because the unnerving thing is that billionaires seem to be more concerned with creating a future that works for them. They don't seem to mind about how many wars happen, because money is always made in wartime. Wars are very good for the armaments and pharmaceutical companies. And they're building all their bunkers in safe parts of the world. So it's as if they're saying, what we need, what we want to do is get richer, and the rest of the world, if there's climate crises, if there's a world war, it's not going to happen. And I think that that's rather upsetting. And what is also upsetting is that in governments now, not only in America, Trump has a lot of billionaires in his cabinet and his negotiators in the war with Iran, but also in European governments, they're listening more and more to the billionaires and what they want, and not to those who call, to challenge austerity and poverty and inequality and more healthcare for poor people. So, and if you remember, in 2008, it wasn't the poor people who suffered as a result of the financial crisis who got help. It was the bankers who financed them who got helped. So there's something that's happening in the world, that it's moving over into the area of billionaire-hood. And a lot of them, well, all of them, could do a huge amount to make huge differences in the world, but they don't. Now, the problem isn't money. Money is not a problem. Money is neutral. Money is a neutral energy. Like all energy, it can be used for good or for bad. So money can be used to finance wars, or it can be used to rebuild Gaza. And in the hands of generous people, money does a huge amount of good. And let me be clear from the start, there's many very generous, very, very wealthy people who do a huge amount to help the world. The best known being Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. And of course, a lot of horrendous conspiracy theories have grown up around these two, because sort of what they're doing with their money is threatening a lot of the projects of the darker forces in our world. And so misinformation gets spread. It's very sad we're in this post-truth world where horrendous lies are being spread about what is really happening in the world. And I talk about this in great detail in my new book. So the problem about money is that those who want to use it for themselves, it gives them a lot of power. And let me be clear. If you're someone who is very invested in building up huge amounts of money, but there's something imbalanced, there's something wrong. I'm not talking about being you have a company and you do well and you develop it and and you make some money. But I'm talking about those who seriously devote all their energy into making money. Because two things happen that I've observed. One is that kind of person gets increasingly estranged from their humanity and increasingly disconnected from those realities out in the world that aren't their own particular reality, which is the reality, the business reality, the making more money reality. Now, one hat I wear is that of a psychotherapist, and I've worked with a lot of very wealthy people over the years. I've even worked with a billionaire. And what I saw about them is that they're just as unhappy as other people. And actually, I maintain that it's an extreme sense of disconnectedness, of superficiality, of inner emptiness, feeling one's not good enough inside one, that promotes a person to devote a lot of time and energy into amassing money. Because then, in the world we live in, you become an important person. You become, someone of note. Because there's something about the world that we live in is that people who have a lot of money are called successful, whether or not they've done things to make the world a better place. But they're called successful because they have a lot of money. And I think that's rather sad. For me, the successful people are the people who do a lot of good in the world, who help people, who make a difference, who invent incredible things that can irrigate deserts. In fact, the person who did that did not become rich out of his incredible invention. And the original Tesla, who invented all these incredible things to create free energy, he died extremely impoverished because all the big corporations, they tried to ruin him. So this quest for money is kind of like a neurotic quest. I've got to have more because then I have more meaning, then I'm more connected. But actually it disconnects one even more because one just gets to live in one's own tiny, tiny little reality of other billionaires, other people who have Lear jets and own huge acres of, thousands of acres of land in South America and 4-story mega yachts. In fact, there's one billionaire who has 4 yachts and 3 of them are 4 stories. I mean, do you need all that shit? Of course you don't. But the part in one that feels not good enough and wants to make a statement in the world does need that shit. Because you see, money is a very seductive commodity. And when people have huge dollops of it, other people stop asking questions. One wonders how Jeffrey Epstein got away with what he did for so long and how he was able to seduce so many influential people. The reason is that he had a lot of money. I'm still not quite sure how he earned all that money. I've never found that out. But anyway, he did. And when you have money, people don't ask questions because there's something that is attractive. In exactly the same way that some people want to hang around well-known pop stars or actors or actresses, so one has that same need to hang around those who have money. Perhaps something of that financial abundance will rub off on one, sort of like a magical some emanation. And I find it kind of sad, but indicative that in America, a lot of those guys who were Democrats have gone onto Trump's side, you know, the hugely wealthy people, because they know that on his side, America may get destroyed, but they're going to get richer. And that's what's important. I mean, all those people who sort of hang around Trump and sort of listen to what he's saying all the time and sort of clap him, what a wonderful guy you are. They don't love him. They want something of the emanation of that financial power. So sort of money is a huge ego boost. And if you have a lot of it, it can give you the illusion that you're not so empty. Because it gives us status. People look up to us. We're a rich person. People look up to Jeff Bezos, who spent, I think, 45 million pounds on his wedding in Venice. Why did he want to do that? Because he wanted to be noticed. He wanted to be seen as a somebody. You know, it's quite interesting as well that he'd also built his body up. So he was not only financially strong, but he was this big sort of muscle guy as well. Well, maybe, I don't know because I've not met him, but maybe he's not the deepest person in the world. Maybe if you were to connect with him, you wouldn't be able to have very interesting talks and topics other than how Amazon operates. I read an article in The Atlantic by a guy called Noah Hawley about money. I read this article in the Atlantic called "Everything is Free and Nothing Matters." And here's what Noah Hawley said. It is so hot. This is a fan sort of blowing on me, so I'm able to talk a little bit and not pass out. Here's what he said about rich people. They float in a sensory deprivation tank the size of a planet, in which their actions are only ever judged by themselves. Being truly rich doesn't mean amassing enough money to afford super yachts, private jets, or millions of acres of land. It means that everything becomes effectively free. Any asset can be acquired, but nothing can ever be lost, because for soon-to-be trillionaires, no level of loss could significantly change their global standing or personal power. If everything is free and nothing matters, then the world and other people exist only to be acted upon, if they are acknowledged at all. Interesting. This is different from classical narcissism. What I'm talking about is a self-definition in which the individual grows to the size of the universe and the universe vanishes. A lot of the super wealthy exist in that category. It's a kind of hyper-narcissism. And I see it as a very, very deep psychopathological wound. That said, there are many people in the world who are very rich and who do help and who don't sort of live, you know, in big castles and have a fleet of Learjets. And I talked about George Soros and Warren Buffett earlier. They're two people who, by all accounts, seem to do a lot of good. And there's a lot of other people. Pierce Brosnan, I read about, helps a lot of creative actors and creative artists. There are good people who do use their money well, but they're not flashy and they don't talk about it. And make incredible differences in the world. And I think that's very important. I am rather suspect of those people who give millions to create a new wing of some important institution, who create a museum of modern art for a well-known Oxford college. Because I think there's always an axe to grind. You want to tell the world how generous you are to help these great institutions. And so you want to show how cultured you are, how refined you are, so other wealthy people can see how cultured and refined you are. But personally, I don't think that this is where sort of money needs to go. You know, the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, you know, it's fine the way it is. It doesn't need another wing. My college, Christ Church College, Oxford, does not need another edifice built onto it. You know, it was built at the time of sort of Thomas Wolseley, going back to the 16th century. You know, it's cool enough. But also, money in England, and I kind of know this, is that if you give enough to the right people, you can get a nice knighthood after your name. And if you really got a lot of loot to part with, and you know the right people, can even get you into the House of Lords. Yeah, I'm very fond of art. I have this lovely picture here, a Cusco painting. I love it. I've had it a long time. You know, it's a nice primitive, but it shows the descent of the dove of peace, and means a lot to me. So it hurts me. The billions of pounds of very valuable pictures are bought at Christie's and Sotheby's by billionaires who want to get richer. They buy up the best Picassos, Miros, Van Goghs, Chiricos, not for anyone to see or enjoy, but as an investment so they can be hidden away for 10, 15 years and then be sold for a killing. And actually, there's true about that word, a killing used in terms of money. Because a lot of money is used in the interest of killing. Wars cost a hell of a lot of money. Apparently, Trump spent $2 billion for the first week or 10 days of his war against Iran. So I was just thinking, if there were to be a huge financial crisis and money was worth, you know, very little for a bit, and it was such a financial crisis that he'd even touch the big boys who want to hide away in their bunkers and mega yachts. Wars would have to stop because governments wouldn't be able to pay enough money for all those weapons to be made. And you know, I'll tell you what also upsets me. There's always enough money to pay for killing, but there's not enough money to pay for healthcare, to help poor people, to create sort of better conditions for immigrants. And it's sad that that those people who do the greatest work in the world are paid the least. I just watched Al Jazeera last night, and I saw the story of that incredibly brave Palestinian journalist who stood up and talked about the atrocities that Israel is doing to the Palestinians. The Israelis said, look, unless you stop reporting this, we're going to kill you. And he didn't stop, and they killed him. And why and how does this killing going on, how does this ethnic cleansing go on? It goes on because there's money behind it. I had a teacher in the 80s called John Bennett, and he had a teacher called the Shiva Puri Baba, whom he met in India, who was 112 years old and wrote a book about him, a picture of this very upright man with thick black hair, long, thick black hair and a wonderful, noble face, 112 years old, really cool. And Bennett asked him, how can we best live? What do we do that's the best way that we can live with peace in our hearts? And here's what the Shiva Puri Baba replied. We can best help the world by living the right life and practicing charity. Mentally to wish everyone well, even our enemies. Serve other people physically. Give 10% of your income to deserving people and poor people. We're unhappy because we don't live the right life. A right life is one where we think only good thoughts of others, do only good deeds to others, and give of our substance to help others. It reminds me of Gandhi's doctrine of satyagraha, of honoring the soul in every single person. It's interesting, Gandhi did not hate the English people. And when he had a meeting with the English people, with the leaders, what he said to them was this: I hate what you've done to my country, i.e. the colonial exploitation of India, but I honor you as human beings. And I think it's very important. And we also do this to the Musks and the Peter Thiels and the Trumps. We need to honor the divinity, the humanity inside them. We might hate what they do, we might hate what they stand for, but we mustn't send hatred. We need to live with love in our hearts. It's really important. I think the more we live with love in our hearts, the less need there is to have all this external abundance. I think a lot of super wealthy people don't live with love in their hearts. They live with a certain lack in their hearts. And so they have to create all this wealth outside of them. So I like his idea that we need to give 10% of our income to deserving people and poor people. In my small way, I try to help people. And actually, that makes me feel pretty good and I feel pretty happy. In fact, I'm quite happy with my life. I'm not a wealthy person inside. And actually, perhaps I can say why I place generosity high on the table of what's important is because I was born into a wealthy world. So folks, I'm not some angry so-and-so railing at a world that I'm envious of and that I feel has excluded me. On the contrary, I know this super rich world from inside itself. We didn't have Learjets or four-story yachts, but we had a lot of butlers and houses in sort of exotic places, chalets in Switzerland and houses in the most important part of London, and butlers and chauffeurs and Ritz hotels and everything like that. And yes, it gave me a couple of things. It gave me an education. But I didn't like that world of wealth and riches because somehow I found that it excluded people who were not wealthy, or they didn't have some important thing that they could offer. I think that we need to honor the ordinary person in the world. I think that we need to honor people who are simple, who are not famous, who are not rich, who are not great. And I found that in the world that I was brought up in, ordinary people weren't respected. And that's sad, because actually we live in a society that is very much about success or loss. And we see this in Trump. He has to be a winner all the time. And a winner means that you make sort of money on deals, or that you win the Nobel Prize for literature. And if you don't win the Nobel Prize for literature, or, if as a musician, you don't reach the pinnacles, you're a failure. I don't like that world, but I think it's what also lies behind why a lot of people need to become super wealthy, because then they're on the side of the winners. They're not losers. Help. So what's the antidote? I think the antidote is that we need to live with balance and health. And we need to live with inner abundance, with a full heart, that we appreciate ourselves, we appreciate our friends, we appreciate the world we're in, and we also see our lives not being just lived for Serge. How can I just please Serge? But what can Serge do in his tiny little way to make the world a better place? And I think, my friends, that if we can work to make the world a better place in our own minute little way, whatever it is we want to do, then we're going to have a much happier life. I've just written a book about that. Okay, that's all I have to say on this topic. Thank you for listening to me.